rocking and rolling again on the Trans Am. We're going to try to finish up as much as we can on the 4L80 today. We're going cooler lines, torque converter bolts, and US shift is where we're going with our controller. We're going to try to install all of those things today. Spent a couple of hours driving around trying to find some converter bolts for this 4L80. Ended up getting them at O'Reilly's, and everybody wants to know part numbers. So 14040, 14040. They came in packs of 4, and they just said GM. And when I went, they're 10 millimeter by 150. So 10 millimeter by 1.50 by 15 mil. That's what it calls for. And I found them in the help section. I had to go to 2 different O'Reilly's to get enough. They take 6. And I went to Lowe's as well. I went there first and blah, blah, blah. I'm rambling. So, yeah. Wasted a bunch of time, wasted like 2 hours trying to get 6 bolts this morning. So we're going to start rock and roll. I'm going to pop these converter bolts in, and then we can get the starter in, and then I'm going to run the cooler lines. So it's much easier to get your torque converter bolts in when the starter's out of the way. You got a nice little window there. Pop that in. Got a ratchet on the crank. We can put one in, rotate it around, put the next one in, and then we'll start tightening them. Sometimes you won't have enough room to rotate it if you don't put them in almost all the way, but I don't want to tighten them all the way down when I put the first one in, because you might not, your bolt hole might get off-centered a little bit, and it make it real difficult to get the rest of them started. So I'll tighten that up just enough to where I can still move the converter a little bit in the hole, and then I'll get the rest of them in. And I'm also going to put a little black dot so I know when I rotate around where I started. So I use my Mean Street pen and just put a little white mark on that bolt. It just gives me a reference to hey, I started here, I'm stopping here when I go to tighten them up. So I've tightened that bolt down just enough to all right, so go ahead and rotate it. Just where I can get to the next bolt hole, and then we'll just tighten that up a little bit. Keep moving, get all the bolts in, and tighten them up. All right, so I got them all tightened up, and like again, I rolled it back around twice, checked all my bolts twice, and that little white dot on that bolt, the first one, just gives me a reference of, all right, this is your starting and stopping point. And I like these new bolts because they come with a little lock sealer, a little thread locker on them. They're a Dorman bolt, again, 14040 is the part number on those. And yeah, for like 12 bucks. I had to buy 2 packs of 4, even though it has 6 bolts, because they didn't have one specifically for this car or the setup. So ended up with 2 extra bolts, no biggie. Still only cost me like 14 bucks, I think, total, and a little bit of gas money. All right, so we're gonna start making cooler lines now. Well, we're gonna put the starter in, and then we're gonna start making cooler lines. So I let's see if I can get my lighting a little better here. So there's my dash 6 in the front. And then the dash 6 in the back. You can see it back here. So the lines will run this way. The starter goes here, and we'll run them out. Probably on top of the frame under the mount, most likely, and then come this way with them, come through this hole, and then my cooler is mounted to the front. So I got one 90 facing down and one straight will come out this way. And you'll see those lines shortly. I got my ground hooked up. I got a ground wire between the bell housing and the body. So that's one ground. I've got 3 more grounds to hook up on the top side. Starter going in. It is the AC Delco starter. The part number on this one is 126-17229. 126-17229. So looks like a high torque mini starter. I don't remember when I ordered this where I got it from. It's been a while, but I got new bolts for this as well. All right, so we got GM bolts, starter bolts, part number 116-10633. The reason I'm doing this, guys, is because I keep getting all these questions about part numbers and links. I don't have an affiliate anything, so I'm not putting links in. But if somebody wants to pay me for that, I will. Run these starter bolts up in evenly. All right, starter is in. All right, with our converter bolts tight, our starter's installed. Now we're moving on to our PTFE transmission cooler lines. I didn't film it, but I mocked it up how I wanted it routed. Basically, I put the straight fitting on the cooler up top here, and then just routed my line how I wanted it. I took some electrical tape, marked off the length, went over to the vise. I've got a pair of cutters, and I have made a video on making PTFE hose too, if you want to go back and watch that. It's in the list. So I cut this off, and with this PTFE hose, if you don't have good hose, let me tell you, it will fight you and fight you and fight you. But if you have good quality hose and fittings, it makes things a lot easier. I've got Fragola here. That's what we're working with, fittings and hose, and it went together pretty painlessly. I don't know if you've ever messed with it. Hang on a second, I'll show you. Okay, so a PTFE AN fitting is not like a regular AN fitting. It has a little collar inside, or an olive, some people call it. This one just stuck in there. There it goes. So you slide this on your hose first. I'm just going to give you a semi demonstration. We're not actually going to build this yet because I got to mock this one up. So you slide your hose, your fitting over your hose. This one's got tape on it still, so it's not wanting to slide. So you slide it over like that. Slide it down where the hose is sticking through it, and you take a flathead screwdriver, a little tiny one, and you go in between the nylon tubing that's inside the steel braids. So you go in between the steel braids and the nylon tubing. But you gotta make sure you put this on first. So this is slid down here. You open this up a little bit, and you slide this says a taper to it, if you can see that. You slide it in between the steel braid and the nylon tubing, and you got to make sure it slides in good and nice and even all the way to the top of it. And when you cut this stuff, it wants to flatten. Like this side has. See how it's flattened down? So I take a little Phillips head screwdriver and I just work it back around real lightly, and then I go in between it with a flathead and I open the steel braid off of the tubing. You slide your old collar down on it, and then I take transmission fluid and I dip this in a little cup full of transmission fluid and I lube it up, and you stick this down in there, and then you can slide. Then you can slide this piece, which has got hose on it, back in, and I put this in a vise, and I just start taking my AN wrench and I start tightening it down. I make sure my hose stays compressed real good and stays on the thing, so when you tighten it up, it doesn't push the hose off, and you just tighten it up like that. It's basically how it works. I routed it. I'm gonna go ahead and show you my routing. So we've got it along here. I've still got it loose. I don't have it secured to the frame or anything yet. So we're routing through this way. We're routing up along the frame rail. Like I said, it's still loose. So I'll secure it to the frame somehow. I got it coming up over the frame this way. And I'm going to secure it to the floorboard or the firewall. I guess this is part of the firewall this way. I'll probably put my oxygen sensor on the other side of it there. That way it stays up off the header. I don't want the header heating up my cooler lines. This would defeat the purpose, wouldn't it? So we got a 90 degree in there. It's still loose. Just sizing things up, showing you guys what I'm doing here. All right, I'll show you one. This is the last one I'm doing anyway, so this is what it looks like after I've cut it. Before I do anything, I gotta slide this on. You want your threads facing your fitting. If you have trouble getting this on your hose is too fat. I've had that problem with this 6AN line. If you look back at the Hydro Boost video, I couldn't even slide this on hardly. I had to fight it just to cram it on. And what I found was the hose was not quite the right diameter, and I couldn't get the fittings together right because of it. So anyway, we got the right stuff here. So you slide that on, doesn't matter how far it goes down, so you're gonna slide it back up. I take a Phillips head screwdriver and I just kind of start working my hole back open as the cutter smushes it. Open that up, and I take a tiny little screwdriver and I get in between that steel and that Teflon tube. You gotta take your time, work it around. Give yourself a little clearance. Sometimes they fight you, depending on how they cut. Sometimes they open right on up. Alright. Sometimes you got to do it several times. So what we're going to do now, we'll take the olive off. I'm going to take the fitting and we'll dip it in a little transmission fluid. And I'll lube up my hose and my fitting. Alright. And I want to make sure that this will go in without folding my hose over, like so. Give it a couple spins. Trying to make that round again, basically. Alright. And you might have to work your steel braid a few times, because it can be a real pain. And you can walk away from this situation with a lot of blood, because that little steel braid will cut you open. But once you get used to it, you stop cutting yourself. You figure it out. I usually like it to spread a little more than that, but this one's being stubborn, just because I'm trying to show you. It's wanting to fight me. It's not wanting to open up. I'll use a little bit bigger screwdriver. Work it around. Basically trying to separate it enough where you can slide this olive in between the steel and the Teflon, like I probably already said. There. But still not opened up enough. Still being a butt. Alright. Alright, let's try it now. That's where I didn't have this much trouble on the other 3 fittings I've done right before this. That's all right though. Here we go. All right. So basically you want to slide it in between steel and the Teflon, and make sure it's all the way down. I just put it on the table and I'll give it a little push. And I'll turn my light on and make sure I'm all the way in there. And my fitting's still lubed up. I'm gonna put a little more on that thing. And you just want to make, ow, just stabbed myself. I'm going to slide it in there like that. You want to make sure that hose doesn't fold over inside there, then you're going to have a massive leak. And you slide it up, get it started. And what I do is I stick this fitting in. I don't have one of those fancy aluminum AN fitting holders in my vise. So I do have a rag. So I'll just stick the rag in the vise, and you got to tighten the crap out of it just enough to where it doesn't turn. And I'll push down on the hose at the same time I'm tightening this. Once it starts grabbing, it's going to start wanting to twist your hose. Flipping it as it's binding up. I'll just keep tightening it up like this. Pop that in place. If you don't have the fancy aluminum clamp that I'm talking about, there's a jaw that goes in your vise that holds these fittings. It keeps from marring them up. It's basically like the end of an AN fitting, AN wrench, I mean. It's holding these AN lines, but I don't have one. I've always wanted one, but I never did get around to getting one. So I have boogered a fitting or two up in my time. But make sure you got some decent wrenches. I've had this set of AN wrenches for 30 years probably. It's my first nitrous kit. Just make sure it's good and snugged up. There you go. Gotcha. Custom line, made for two. We'll take my compressed air, blow through them each way. Make sure there's no junk in the line. All right, so there we go. I don't have anything, you know, I'm gonna do something nice, keep these lines together. So they go through the hole there, next to the core support for the radiator. They flow up over the frame rail, away from the header. This will be away from the header too. Then I'll have to trim the evaporator drain for the AC too. And then we'll tie these together where they're like that. They go up in the tunnel like that. Nice and neat. Awesome. All right, well, we'll tighten that stuff up and secure some of it. I don't know if I have enough securements for everything yet, but we'll go ahead and button that stuff up, and then we're going to jump on. I really ought to start looking at that drive shaft so I can have a drive shaft made. But I may go ahead and wire up. I've got to go another job I've got to go do tomorrow, so I may go ahead and start playing with wiring up the controller and see what I've got to do with that. I have not even looked at the kit yet. Surely it can't be too complicated. I would hope not. Don't know where we're going to mount the box or any of that stuff, so we'll get into that next. All right, so I got the cooler ons all buttoned up. We got the starter in, got the converter bolts in, and I got the dipstick in. We went with a Summit deal. It's the same thing as a low car, and that's the part number right there, SUM 702203. Flexible dipstick tube. The only thing I don't like about the flexible tubes, the universal tubes, is you have to use this little deal to get transmission fluid in them because the hole is so small in the tube. So if you don't have that with you, have fun getting fluid in the hole or in the transmission through that hole. So in order to power this transmission up, make it shift and all that, we went with a US shift quick 2. Have some friends that have run this module before and had problems with other brands and went to this module and had a lot of good things to say about them. So I trust their opinion, and we're going to go with this deal. You can see this has got to be mounted inside, somewhere close, you know, somewhere visible, or maybe in the center console, or under the dash where you can pull it down and look at it when you need to. I don't know exactly where we're going to put it yet, but we got to mount, we got to wire up this harness. The connections are already there for the most part, but we have to take a few of these wires and find some signals. We have to get a ground, we have to get power, which is going to be that, and we have to get a ground, which is going to be probably those black wires that say ground on them. Those have to be grounded to the ECU, it says, and this has to be powered from the ECU. It's got to be a 12 volt switchable and switch on, where it turns on with the key and stays on with the key. That's just about as far as I got in the instructions, so I'm going to just kind of lay the harness out. Just more stuff I've got to wire up. I still have to plug in, I still have to kind of power up the vintage air kit, and I still have to power up the fuel pump and the fans as well. So we got quite a bit of wiring to do still, which is not my favorite. Yeah. All right, so we'll lay this harness out real quick. This little arrow right here faces up, so you should not be able to see it from the bottom of the car. So it's gonna plug in like so. Like that. And we have some wire loom to put on this. And we really got to figure out where this controller is going to go and where I'm going to put these wires through the firewall. Oh yeah. Okay, let's figure that out. All right, so that's kind of what it'll look like. You know, I'm gonna route it up this way. Yep, got lots of little loose odds and ends of wiring to button up. That's all I have time for today in this one. Hey, thanks for hanging out. Come back and see me in the next one. Hopefully we'll get a little further. We did get some progress done today. Like I said, we got cooler lines made. We got torque converter bolts and installed. Got the starter installed. Dipstick tube installed. Still got to mount it up top. I'm trying to get everything down here done that I can before I lower the car back down. I mean, it's not a big deal going up and down. Started playing with the shift linkage here that I ordered, but I don't have the nut. So I got to come up with a nut for the shift shaft, and hopefully that will tighten up properly. I'm not running the neutral safety switch behind it that normally comes on these things. They're usually huge. They're like take up this whole area, so we don't need that thing, I don't think. I believe the instructions when I kind of breeze through them on the US shift so they don't use it. So there's no sense in buying that. But anyway, I gotta come up with a nut. My assortment of nuts here, I don't have anything that fits right, so I gotta figure out what thread pitch that is. I think it may be at 8.125, but I'm not positive. And go find me some hardware. All right, come back, see us in the next one. Peace.